This Friday, we are having no community questions on the Q&A thread. If you don't know, you always can insert your questions, which I will be answering every Friday. And since there are no Qs this week, I thought this is so typical for people that are not in the financial situation they desire to be in. How often does this happen that you spend your money, and this is truly spending, not investing, on something, you receive something in return and you actually don't use it? Because with the Q&A thread, you have the possibility to answer any questions and receive some, I think, very powerful answers to whatever is going on and happening right now. Welcome to the podcast, Manifesting Big Money Fast. My name is Janine Hurd. I am so excited that you found this podcast or that you're tuning in to another episode. This podcast is all about manifestation, big money, energetics, spirituality, how it's all connected, and most importantly, how you can increase your bank account right now. So let's dive in today's episode. Very often, I always say this, big money is not made, but big money is actually received. And receiving happens in so many forms. Receiving is also how much help can I receive? And people think I'm like, oh, I'm fabulous at receiving. Let me just receive. And then I receive the money. And I always tell them, you don't have a problem making the money because that's a hard way that is very slow. You have a receiving problem, and people always stare at me. I'm like, what does this mean? What does this mean? And that we are having no Qs for the first time on the Q&A thread shows me again that the community has a receiving problem. Let me analyze. Let me give you some thoughts about this. So either I invest in something always. This is how I spend my money. That's good for me now and for the future. Otherwise, I don't spend my money anymore. Just spend it on something that's good for me now and in the future. And if I don't know how this can be good for me now or the future, I just don't spend the money. And that makes sure all the money that goes out of my wallet goes to something meaningful that has an impact. And very often when we don't have this, like how is this beneficial for me now and for the future, we are sending our money anywhere and everywhere. And then we don't even contemplate, is this good for me? This is also a form of receiving. By being part of this podcast, of the VIP podcast, you have the possibility to receive a personal answer from me, theoretically, every Friday, which is time-wise is probably a quarter of a one-on-one session. Every episode is between 15 and 20 minutes. A one-on-one session with me costs $10,000. So a quarter would be $2,500, meaning you receive an answer that has a value of $2,500 for whatever you pay for the podcast, which is pretty insane. And because most of you are having a receiving problem, you can't receive it. It's too much for you. This is so interesting to contemplate. How often is the universe sending you help, sending you guidance, impulses, insights, ideas, inspiration? You've just listened to the first 4 minutes of the VIP version of the podcast. By becoming a VIP member, you can listen to 3 episodes per week. You will receive early bird access to the Monday episode, so you already can listen on Sunday. And if that doesn't sound great enough yet, I've got one more. Why you should become a podcast VIP member. I'm answering every week a listener's question in the podcast. So if you have a question, drop it in the Q&A thread and receive the answer in the podcast. Can't wait to see you. Simply click on the link in the show notes or go to courses.richandhappiness.com to become a VIP member.